Well, let's bring in the Shadow Minister for Child Protection, Liberal Senator Kerrynne Liddle, who joins me now from Adelaide. And Kerrynne Liddle, thanks for your time. I wanted to start by asking you first about this news poll on The Voice. You were someone who spent time on the Joint Select Committee examining the referendum. Do you see it failing now?
Well, as part of that process, which was all of 6 weeks, 4.5 days of which were examining in detail the words of that are being proposed, we heard from various legal experts that talked about risk, unquantifiable risk and uncertainty, and there was a complete refusal for any compromise, including from Mr Pearson. So that's what's being presented to the Australian people, a no compromise position, both The Voice and their view of constitutional recognition in the Constitution, for no other reason other than The Voice can't be removed if it's in the Constitution. That's a big question for the Australian people to consider.
Well, do you think it will succeed or fail, though, when you look at those numbers?
Well, I think we hear comparisons to the 1967 referendum, but this referendum is nothing like that referendum. When that referendum occurred, there were a majority of states and a majority of two territories. 90.77% of people said yes, and it was a very simple proposition. This is much different to that proposition, and that was about nation building. This has been about going to a referendum when the numbers are barely over 50%, and I think that when you approach it in that way, you approach it in a divided, partisan way, then the result is the result.
Well, Noel Pearson, you heard him before, he had some pretty pointed remarks about Peter Dutton and his stance on the legislation. He said Mr Dutton had been duplicitous in saying to him that he would not bring a race argument, and then saying in Parliament that this proposal would re-racialise Australia. What do you make of those comments from Mr Pearson?
Well, that's what Mr Pearson says. My advice is that wasn't the detail of those conversations, and I've checked with Mr Dutton's office and Mr Leese's office, so I'm quite comfortable that that's not the recollection of the conversation of two people within my party.
So you don't think that Peter Dutton said that to Noel Pearson? You think Noel Pearson is making it up, or he's misconstrued something?
Well, I think that's for Mr Pearson to explain why their recollections of those meetings is different to theirs. I just want to say one of the things that is frustrating for me in the new portfolio areas that I have is that we are talking about this constantly and we're not focusing on some of the really big issues that are affecting people now. The fact that 17 of the Close the Gap targets, there's only 2 that have been met or that are on track. The fact that people were promised 500 domestic and family violence community workers by the Albanese government, and at the end of their first year, not one has been delivered. We have a crisis in the Northern Territory, and we just continually as a nation keep talking about voice, as opposed to talking about issues that are affecting people every single day. For every single day that these things aren't delivered, that we're not focusing on those issues with the same vigour, is a day too long for those people who are most affected by these issues. That's what is frustrating me about this whole discussion.
Fair